and welcome to It Takes a Village podcast. This is a podcast where we explore ideas how to build stronger, more compassionate communities. And we're excited to be doing this here at Countryside. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Jenny Schultz-Thomas, and I'm joined today by Sarah Renzel-Jones, my colleague and friend and a regular contributor here on It Takes a Village. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, thank you for having me again. I had such a good time last week and excited to talk some more today.
Yeah, we are excited to dive into David Brooks' book. I know many of you have read this book. If you are a regular participant here at Countryside or a friend of our community or just someone who loves David Brooks, I think he really hit it out of the park with this book. How to Know a Person, the Art of Seeing Others and Being Deeply Seen. I know when I picked this book up for the first time, it just hooked me, right? We're living in a time when we are just experiencing polarization at every level, right? In relationships across this country, we are divided, although I think there's a deep hunger, which is what he speaks to, a longing for deep connection and belonging. So with that, we're going to dive in. We are launching our village houses here at Countryside this week. There's a dinner on Wednesday night. If you have registered for that, awesome. Right after that, we will be joining with our village houses for the first time. And we are thrilled. So this is an opportunity for us to walk alongside, to ask similar questions, to maybe support our community as we are listening deeply to what David Brooks is talking about. So in chapter 1, The Art of Seeing, Brooks opens up by talking about how in today's world we're really seeing with superficial eyes, which I think is easy to do. I mean, the art of seeing deeply is not really served up on a platter. We are living in a hustle-bustle world. We are, I think, caught up in the lives that we have curated for ourselves, right, in the West. Here in Omaha, there are so many opportunities and so many things to dive into. I know in family life, I feel like we are, expected to, right, participate in all the things, right? If your kid is only in 3 sports, where's the 4th sport if they're not, right? So we've kind of created this really fast-paced world, but superficiality, I think, allows us to do that at some level. But what about deep relationships? How do we do all of that, but really sit down and say, wow, spending time with you, with a friend, with family, that's the heart of what it means to be in community. Mm-hmm. What struck you about this, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to loving how he talks about seeing others as a skill and really deeply being with them as something we can cultivate, I really like the way he talks about it as an art. And it makes me think of most art requires slowing down, right? I mean, sometimes it can be another activity while we're practicing and taking lessons, but often it requires us to really stop what we're doing in other areas of our lives to be fully present and to really be with our art. And so if listening is an art, seeing is an art, that means that we have to stop running around for a few minutes and being so busy and really be with the person in front of us, really listen, not just be thinking about the next thing on our to-do list.
And that's so powerful. I mean, the next thing on my to-do list is always the thing I didn't get to the last time, and then I carried it over, right? So this art, I love how you're talking about that. Art really demands that we stop and listen. And I mean, I think art, if you think about visible and visual arts, where someone has painted something or there's a photograph, so often people want to know, what did the artist mean? What did the artist have in mind when they painted this? And so many artists want you, right, who's observing the art, to really find your own deep meaning in the art. And so I think that's a real gift, because it means that this art of relationship, right, that we can intentionally bring our full intention, our full self, and be present with another person. And that's how they will in turn, right, see us, right, through the honesty of our own, bringing our excited stories, our trauma, our longing for connection. But instead of projecting those things, right, we can just sit with them and somebody can just listen and be present with us, rather than thinking that we need to fix it, or, right, in this really hustle-bustle world, that we have to provide solutions, or that we're just sort of that, friend arm candy. It's about deep transformation, right? Art, when you see a piece of art and it speaks to you, there's this aha moment of, wow, at the core, it resonates and something really clicks, right? And hopefully that's healing, or, deep longing, and I'm finding connection with the self as well as the world around me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know we really both like this passage that he shares about beholding his wife and this concept of beholding. And what you were saying really made me think of that with the art, because I think it's probably a similar, not to objectify a human, but if we are really being and not objectifying, but being with the art or any kind of mutual encounter, we would be beholding, I think. It's like a similar setting of wanting to really be with it, almost like communing with it.
No, that's great. Yeah, like being with it. Yeah, that quote that Brooks shares, and I think it's on page 16, about his wife. He said he's sitting at the dining room table working, and he just looks up and he sees his wife kind of framed in the front doorway of their home. And he goes on, about seeing her, and not only seeing her, but seeing outside of her and kind of through her. And I was thinking about, is that really an accessible quote? I was thinking, reading that, do you have to have that kind of deep intimacy with a romantic partner, or, what can anyone take from that example? And I think it's really this quote that he says, to really know someone, you have to know how they know you. And I thought, gosh, there's a certain level of intimacy there, no matter if it's friendship or it's a spouse, a child, just somebody and love, this deep intimacy. But what about just the people that we are in relationship with every day? Coworkers, neighbors, church members that we don't know super well, those that we're trying to really build community with. I think to know how others see us, we have to know how we see ourselves, right? And how we see ourselves is often how we see others, right? So it's this double-sided coin. If we just take this quote and we think about Mary Pfeiffer, who says, to be able to understand people and be present in their experience, that's the most important thing in the world. Well, to be able to do that, we have to be able to be present with ourselves, right? If you see somebody standing in the doorway, you could easily objectify that person if you have a hidden self, right? If you are not understanding, like, how are you seeing this person? How do you see yourself? Is there a deep honesty about respect and regard and seeing someone else for who they are, not for what they can do, right? Because so much of that is the commodification of our relationships or others in the world. And, I think we were talking about this before, but I think of marginalized communities, right? People that we oppress, every single day just by imagining that what we see on that superficial level is what is truth. Like a homeless person, well, they probably didn't work hard enough. It's the laundry list of how we can see others in a way that I think we haven't done the work on understanding what lens are we looking through. We have to ask hard questions of ourselves, so that we can then embody a deep, dignifying humanization to those that we do see.
Yeah. Well, I really loved the whole section about Mary Pfeiffer because, she's a therapist. So you think about all the years of training and all of the skills that she developed. But then what she's sharing is that really when she's sitting down with a client, she is kind of using all of that, but it's in the background.
Right.
And every encounter is new. And every encounter is, being with them without bringing along all of this expertise. Not like laying it out like you would give someone a handout and say, here, just try these things and you'll feel better.
Right.
But really deeply listening, hearing things through the way that the client will tell you the story, not through what you think even is their diagnosis. Letting them tell you afresh. I just found that to be so beautiful because we often think, well, that's your job, right? If you're a therapist, you've been trained to do that. You're just doing your job. But really what she's saying is she's bringing her whole self to it.
Yes.
And she has to show up with that level of intention every time in order for it to really be as effective as she would want it to be in that, making that connection.
Yeah. That when it just sounds like just deep honesty, right? Because even a skill set, right? We can all read and research and have, 16 books that we've memorized about a particular issue, and now we're the expert in the room. But, to listen to somebody who honestly puts those things aside and brings their own vulnerability, their own presence, their own deep listening, it's transferable in a room, right? It's that transformative relational energy, right? And it also says, I'm safe,
Right.
Like, this person actually sees me. They're not trying to prove who they are to me. They're not trying to, right? And I think that might be, I think that's challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be one of the things that we can start working on, right? In these villages, in our communities, how to be honest with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then less worried about kind of the superficiality of how someone might be judging or receiving us,
Yeah.
right? Because of course the world's going to judge us, right? So just throw that out the window, right? If we
Mhm.
don't show up as ourselves, who else are we?
Mhm.
And what other opportunities to deeply know and be known?
Yeah.
That's such a great example. And Mary Pfeiffer shows up throughout this book, which is pretty amazing. You know, we've talked about how to see a person. And then the very next chapter that David Brooks invites us to is how not to see a person, which, you know, is not super exciting, but it's so important that we understand. And he kind of lays out some really great examples. He talks about diminishers and illuminators, you know, and so often we could easily point out someone who's just negative, like toxic negative energy, right? But there are a lot in between being an illuminator and somebody, you know, who's super toxic, right? There's that work in between, right? How to be honest, right, with ourselves and our friends, but to illumine the things that are going to bring healing, wholeness, and transformation, rather than sort of see that friend as your punching bag or your doormat, right? And just wait until it's your turn. You know, that classic, like, sit by the pool, you know, and someone can be filing their nails, reading a book, and even picking up their cell phone, and their friend is still going on about all their drama. And that's friendship. But really, where is that, like, honest exchange? So I don't think it's just this deep sort of dysfunctional lack of intimacy or engagement. But he does draw a pretty hard line, and using this classic memoir from 1987, Vivian Gornick, and this relationship that she has with her mother after her father died. I mean, it's classic codependency, but it was heart-wrenching just to read. I was thinking about how it's in times of tragedy that we reveal how open we are to healing and to, you know, deep, abiding relationship, or how cut off we are. And then a lot of people in loss and grief who haven't had that openness throughout their lives will just shut the world out. And, you know, in this situation, this mother can't even see her daughter. Her daughter said, you know, she didn't even see that I was there. I mean, just such a deep loss. But I feel like we see that a lot in relationships, and so often you wish you could go back, you know, and sit with someone and ask questions, but without really seeing each other, you can't see each other's pain. You can't see the beauty that they bring to your own life. You know, what a sad situation. How did that impact you? I mean, it was chilly to read about it, but there's things that we can take from that, right, in these village communities to bring to each other.
Yeah, I kept thinking of the line that, you know, when difficult things happen, and especially with grief or loss of a loved one, that it can make you bitter or it can make you better. And I feel like, you know, it sounds maybe a little harsh because we don't want to judge someone in their time of grief, but at the same time, as you move through it with intentionality, it's like, are you kind of metabolizing it and moving forward, or are you allowing it to, like, kind of encrust you in this moment and in this new sense of who you are, like being a widow, like being the aggrieved one, versus really having to work through it and integrate it into who you are as a whole person, and really letting it give you a depth that maybe you didn't have before, that you know what it's like for someone else to have a similar experience. And I think too, like, every time that there is a loss, everyone who was in relationship with that person is having a different loss. You know, even two children will have a different loss because they had different relationships with their parent. And certainly a mother losing her husband and a daughter losing her father, there's different grief there. But it really, it was a difficult story to read about how they became both enmeshed and so polarized from each other in a way of really only seeing each other as each projected, right? But it was just a kind of a cautionary tale, I guess.
Yes, I know. I think what you're saying about different relationships and how, I mean, pain doesn't discriminate, right? But when you start to see, first of all, you embody your pain and then you become only your loss or your pain, whether it's from trauma or loss of a loved one. I think that can be this deep, superficial, security blanket, right? Because so often when you don't know how, which is David Brooks' point, you don't know how to do the work. Like, how do I practically take a step forward? How can I practice? It just becomes easier to sit with that pain, right? And that becomes your whole identity. And then relationships, familial relationships, right? A brother, a sister, a mother, a husband, an uncle, then that family, right, is shaped by that pain and the loss, instead of responding to the pain and the loss and being able to move closer to one another to build strength in those relationships. I mean, it's cliche, right? If only we would just, heal and choose to love each other deeper and harder. I think the good thing is you can always start somewhere, right? I mean, I was talking with someone recently who had lost a spouse, and kind of what you were talking about with this, if you have lost someone or you've gone through something, right, you can be that offering to someone else. And they said, it's different to hear now on this side of loss when someone who has also lost their spouse comes and shares and says, I'm here for you, I understand, but let me know. He said it means something different now. They have experienced that pain, albeit a different person, and everybody's pain is unique, and loss, of course, can customize like into the deepest parts of who we are. But having this different way of appreciating and feeling seen, because out of someone else's deep pain and vulnerability, they offered, right, this I see you. And that's it, a simple, I've been there, let me know. And this person said, I would definitely pick up the phone because now it means something more. So, even out of tragedy, how not to see a person, clearly I think for me, the lesson here is not to see a person through our own eyes that have not been, the reciprocal nature of projection, right? Not projecting on our own pain or our own anything, but to see another person just exactly for who they are, right? I mean, we could sit and finish the podcast on how to not see a person, but I think the joy is that there's always, the next step in learning how to see people well and ourselves.
Yeah, and that's a great way to move into the third chapter on illumination, because thankfully we're not left only in being a diminisher. But we have lots and lots of suggestions on being illuminators. What really struck you about this chapter?
Oh, great. Yeah, chapter 3 about illumination. I was really drawn in by the holistic attitude, and I love Tolstoy. So, just hearing this quote, of course, he talks about man, love men and women and humankind, but Tolstoy, right? So think of that. But the quote is, one of the commonest and most generally accepted delusions is that every man can be qualified in some particular way as good, evil, intelligent, stupid, energetic, apathetic, and so on. Men are not like that. We may say of a man that he is more often good than evil, more intelligent than stupid, more energetic than apathetic, or the reverse. But it would not be true to say of one man that he is good or intelligent, and of another that he is evil or stupid. Yet we are always classifying mankind in this way, and it's wrong. Human beings are like rivers, and this is my favorite part. Human beings are like rivers. The water is one and the same in all of them, but every river is narrow in some places, flows swifter in others. Here it's broad, there still, or clear, or cold, or muddy, or warm. It is the same with men. Every man bears within him the germs of every human quality. Anyhow manifests one, now another, and recently he is quite unlike himself, while still remaining the same man. Yeah, it was just powerful to me to think about, right? Because we so often define ourselves by what other people say about ourselves. Oh, well, she was a great athlete. Oh, he's such a good performer. Oh, she's such a good mother. Oh, he's a pill. Oh, she, whatever it is, like, oh, she always, enters a room. It's just amazing to think about how these simple stratifications, right? These classifications, and we've done this throughout humanity, right? Who has the power, who doesn't, who's in, who's out. But we are, each of us human, we all come from the same place, out of water, right? Out of the embryo, out of the deep waters of life. I mean, if we talk about the spirit world, if we talk about our physical world, we are made up of 70+% water. So we are this great metaphor. We are not one or the other. And it's a good reminder, right? Because I do this all the time, whether it's talking to, a parent, a sibling, a friend, a distant aunt. It's okay, I'm going to have this conversation, and this is going to be the way it goes, right? Because we've already determined or predetermined who this person is, and that's the only way that person can show up. Instead of seeing somebody with a holistic approach, what he calls this holistic attitude. So yeah, it's pretty beautiful and a reminder.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder that within each of us there are all these potentialities, right? Like we're not all good or all bad, and to avoid the trap of labeling, right? And I loved what you said about how we show up in conversation, and it's tricky because in some ways we don't want to set ourselves up for harm if we consistently know that when we have a certain conversation with a certain person, it tends to leave us feeling terrible, or they tend to move to like an abusive posture. But at the same time, not necessarily, especially as we're getting to know people, I think not assuming how they're going to show up in conversation, because then it's almost like we're already sort of pre-controlling it by saying, well, I know he's just going to be like this, or when I say this, she's going to say that. And instead we could have a new version of them today, and we could even allow room for them to grow and to change. And I think that's so important, especially while we're with people that maybe we are trying to transition into a new realm with. I mean, we know that at church we're having different changes as we come into this fall season, and we need room to grow, and we need room to kind of spread out as a community and try new things, and that means seeing each other with fresh eyes.
That's so important. I mean, so many things are going through my mind as you're talking about that. First, I think about when we have these relationships, and we all have them, right? Where I, love this person, but I will not talk about politics and religion, right? The more you know someone and the more you can deeply appreciate that person for that relationship, love them for who they are, it's almost like setting ground rules about things that you disagree on these things, great, still, it's kind of important to respect those differences in a way that dignifies sort of an opt-out conversation where it's not because you don't want to be vulnerable, it's because it's okay to not try to, right, coerce someone to your side or whatever it is, right? Politics, religion, it doesn't matter. But it could be like, what are we having for Thanksgiving dinner, right? And you just know the one wants pot roast and the one wants turkey, and you're just out of the conversation. I think it's just these examples of the deeper our relationships go, right? Whether it's in community or with family, you have to make choices. I mean, I know that coming out to my parents, becoming who you really are, and having struggles with how do people see you or do they accept you? So many people have had these kind of deep rehumanizing or dehumanizing experiences, and you have to decide, well, what does this relationship mean to me, and how do I not give away my own humanity and the dignity of who I am? And if you can't have some good ground rules, right, then you have to make really hard decisions about who can be a part of your life and who can't. And we all have different thresholds for what that looks like. But I think the most important thing is that we know when we're entering into those relationships what we need and where that safety line is, and the work that we've done, and how we allow people to take steps forward, and we take 2 steps forward, and really what's the meat of that relationship. I think there's across the gamut. It's from family systems work, cutting off, to re-engaging, to not talking about those things and just enjoying the relationship as is, right? Yeah. So it does take a lot of work, but seeing each other, again, it's like taking that first step. It's vulnerability. It's knowing this matters to me so much that I want to start this conversation. And then as you take the next step, you can create guardrails around, well, what feels safe and what feels important for this time, and what might be left to your own family conversations or your best friend conversations. But I think it's important that we can have common relationships, right, with people that we are superficially engaged with, and take 1, 2, 3 more steps, like we're doing at church.
Yeah. And I think that makes me think of the quality that really stood out to me in this chapter. I know you liked holistic attitude. I really appreciated the one about receptivity. And he says that we're being truly receptive when we resist the urge to project our own viewpoint. You do not ask, how would I feel if I were in your shoes? Instead, you are patiently ready for what the other person is offering. So this makes me think again of that question, like, what was that like for you? Really being curious and open to hearing what another person might share, not saying like, oh, I imagine that was really difficult, even if that's exactly true. You know, sometimes I think when we want to practice empathy, it's almost like we're suggesting what the feeling was so that they might think like, oh, you're really tracking with me. You're with me. But what if I say, well, that must have been really hard. And someone says, actually, it was a great relief. And then maybe the look on my face makes them feel like, oh, I shouldn't have been relieved because she thinks it would have been hard for me, you know, and then there's a new barrier versus a more of a blank slate and letting a person say, you know, yes, my spouse was sick for so long and I was their caregiver and I missed them so much. And at the same time, that was really hard. And I'm glad that they're at peace now, you know, and I didn't prompt any of that. I just let them share that.
Yes. I think that curiosity piece, right, can be the grounding work there. Because so often I hear people all the time say, I wish I hadn't have said that, right? They'll hear, you know, from a loved one, a friend, and I think the response, the human urge, right, is to say something to make someone feel better. And probably we could write 1,000 books on what not to say, but really what to say. And this neutrality of, I don't have to say anything, I can just listen. I think it takes a lot of practice, but it's not putting yourself in someone's shoes or projecting. It's understanding the goal, right? The goal is to give space, right? A safe space where someone can share something deeply meaningful, whether it's a celebration or a hurt, and that it can be held, right? We're just holding this space, and then silence. One of the most difficult things is having sitting there and holding that and not needing to say something right after.
Yes.
And I know that has always been one of my challenges in creating safe space is wanting to fix, right? We want to say something to make someone feel better. And so then we project or we just rush through it, right? Instead of allowing that silence to be the work, right? The work sometimes is just that release. And now we all just abide together.
Yeah.
Right? Without having to fix or anxiously kind of move through something. So yeah, abiding relationships and that curiosity, it's also, I think, a skill to say, next time I'm going to really work on, because I felt, you know, that I really love this person and I want them to be able to confide or to share. I want to offer something and making a commitment that, oh, the next time, gosh, that was so great, but I'm going to work on this. Just like I love that David Brooks is this warrior champion for himself. You know, I have these goals. I want to be this. I want to be that. And you can see a life transformed. And I hope that we all can take some kind of step forward in our own curiosity to be that deep listener. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think that we all have the capacity to do it. You know, we just have to keep strengthening it. It's like a muscle. And thinking about it that way means that nobody can say, oh, you know, I'm just not good at that.
Right.
You know, because we have the ability to keep an eye on ourselves. And, you know, like if you're in a conversation with someone and you want to say, well, why didn't you do this? Or why don't you try that? You know, maybe being able to catch it. And even, you know, 1 time out of 10 to start practicing, like, oh, this time I held that back. And I waited for them to say, do you have any suggestions? Or what would you do if that happened? Because I think if people want our concrete help, they will tell us. If we allow that space, they might ask us for our ideas. But until then, we can continue to listen and be curious and receptive and just let them share with us.
It's so true. You know, and Brooks has so much more to say in this book, and I know that you all have so much more to say. It seems like these first 3 chapters have been about deep presence and listening, right? And really that's about connection, creating connection and belonging. So we hope that you will dive into David Brooks' book and that you will really get to receive the benefit of your village house, of new friendships, of those who will listen together, have dialogue, and I think challenge one another, right? Challenge each other to slow down, to be present, to look around and pay attention to yourself and to those around you. I think one of the most exciting things, and Brooks talks about, you know, sometimes we're not really skilled, but we all have a deep longing to be known and to know other people in this kind of intimate, transformative way. And that's what we're seeing at Countryside. Yeah, I'm so excited about launching the Village Houses this week. We have over 130 people signed up to join a Village House. I mean, that just shows us that we are a people who long for deeper connection. And at the United Church of Christ here at Countryside, we always say that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And I think this allows us to take that welcome one step closer to affirming that you belong here. You're welcome and you belong no matter who you are, no matter what questions you have. We want you to feel like you belong and that this community is supporting you on that journey of faith and this journey we call life. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. It's such an exciting opportunity to engage in these deeper conversations.
Yeah, it's been so great. And I hope that this podcast is a place that people can come to even touch base with the book. Honestly, if you didn't read it, just be able to use this as a jumping off point for your group discussions and really have a chance to connect and belong here at Countryside.
Yeah. Let's continue asking questions. Let's continue taking what I like to call the next faithful step, right? We don't have to have all the answers. We don't have to be the most amazing version of ourselves every day, but we can commit to just taking that next faithful step, asking one more question, showing up just as we are. So if you are interested in joining a Village House, if you'd like to come to the dinner, you can sign up on our website. You can call the church office. If you don't have the book, you can find it just about anywhere of your favorite bookseller. The Bookworm here in town is selling it. But please do reach out and let us know how we can continue to support you on the journey. Because remember, this is a place to connect and belong. Thank you. We'll see you next week right here on It Takes a Village.